Hi, today I'm going to show you Dubby 2. It's a dub Siren emulation for Mac and PC. It comes in two formats. There's a standalone version and there's also a version for MaxForLive. First of all, let's see what it sounds like and we'll go through each of the presets. Okay, let's look at some of the controls in a little more detail. First of all, we've got the preset dial. This will cycle through each of the stored presets. You can add your own presets by holding down Shift and clicking an empty cell. And to delete it, hold down Alt Shift and click on the cell. So you can use the dial or you can click on the individual presets themselves. Next, we've got the oscillator. You can choose between three different sounds. There's a square wave, a saw wave, and a sine wave. And you can change the basic pitch of the sound as well using this dial. And you can fine tune that as well. Next, we've got the LFO section. You can use the range and the speed to change the style of the LFO. So the range affects the distance between the high point and the low point of the pitch. So with higher ranges, it moves a lot more. With lower ranges, the LFO only moves a little. And you can change the speed of that as well. The shape determines the shape of the LFO, whether it's a smooth sine wave or a square wave that jumps between the high point and the low point set in the range. We've got another LFO as well, which also controls the pitch, but in smaller increments. Next up is re-trigger. This will restart the LFO every time the trigger is pressed from the same point, either a low point or a high point. You can set the low point or the high point start from here, or here we'll start at the low point moving upwards, or at the high point moving downwards. Volume's pretty self-explanatory. Next we've got a dirt dial. This adds more grittiness and distortion to the sound. It's most noticeable on the sine wave. but it does affect the other oscillators too. And finally, we've got the delay section. This will either sync to your project's BPM, in which case this dial affects the note divisions that the delay occurs at. I'll just turn the volume up on the delay so you can hear it. With sync off, the timing is like set to this free dial here. I'll just get a bit more feedback and a bit more volume so you can hear it a little clearer. There's also a filter on the delay as well, so you can turn down some of the high frequencies with the frequency dial. Or boost the point that you're cutting the frequencies off with the resonance. Finally, we've got the trigger, which you can press manually, or it'll activate by pressing or playing any MIDI note. Dubby 2 is fully compatible with the Push 2 controller for Ableton Live. It should work on the Push 1 as well, but I haven't been able to test it. And each of the parameters on Dubby 2 are mapped to dials on the Push 2 controller. There's a sound section, an LFO section, and a delay section. The parameters as well will show up in Ableton Live's automation. So here for the preset video, I'd already mapped some controllers, the feedback and the preset selection. But you can map any of Dubby 2's parameters to automation in Ableton Live. That's it for the MaxForLive version. We'll just switch over now to the standalone version just to show you some of the slight differences. So here we are in the standalone version. You'll notice that everything's pretty much the same as the MaxForLive version. All the presets sound the same and all the sounds are the same and all the dials are pretty much the same. The biggest difference here is this master section down at the bottom. So I'll just explain these other features. First of all, we've got mapping. If we click the mapping button, you get a mapping mode. Now you do also get this in Ableton Live. If you click the MIDI button in the top right hand corner, you can map it to any MIDI controller basically, and you can do the same here. So it'll detect any MIDI controller that you have plugged into your computer. I've got a Novation launch control plugged in here. So all you need to do is click the dial that you want to map. In this case we'll map the preset, and then you move a dial on your controller. Press escape to come out of the MIDI mapping mode. And now the dial is mapped to the dial in Dubby. Included with the download is a Touch OSC template. So if you have Touch OSC for your Android device or for your iOS device, all you need to do is just map it. So we'll just have a quick demo here. So if we click on the mapping button, we'll select pitch. And I'm streaming my iPad screen to my Mac at the moment, and I'm moving a dial there, and you see that's mapped to pitch. Now you will have to map all these individually, but the template is there for you. And we'll map the fine, and basically you just need to go through and map each one. Once you're happy, press escape, you come out of MIDI mapping mode, and then any dials that you move on your MIDI controller will now move on Dubby. You can right click if we're going to mapping again, and you can delete the mapping that you've made. When you're happy with the mapping that you've made, you can click on Save Map and save the MIDI map to your computer. And the same goes for load. Any that you've liked, that you've saved, you can load again. Next, we've got the BPM section. The delay in Dubby is linked to Dubby's internal BPM. There are 4 ways you can set this. You can click and drag with the mouse. You can click and type in a BPM on your keyboard. You can tap a BPM out. or you can sync to anything that outputs a MIDI clock message. So that could be some external gear, or you can do it through any app on your computer that outputs a MIDI clock. To get to this, you just go to Settings, Audio MIDI Settings, and select your MIDI clock in device. Here I'll select my Minilog, which outputs clock messages. And you can see already that the BPM is synced. I can now change the tempo on my Minilog, and the BPM will match the tempo. You can also do this with any other program on your computer which outputs a MIDI clock message. Tractor, for example. Here, if we go into Tractor, go into Settings or Preferences, make sure that External Sync is set to Enable MIDI Clock. Then go into Controller Manager. I'll just delete this one for now. And you click on Add New Generic MIDI. Make sure the import is set to None and the output is set to Dubby 2. Now on a Mac, you will get this internal MIDI port automatically. On Windows, you don't. You'll need to download something called Loop B1. I'll put the link in the description. And it's basically a free internal MIDI port. You just need to install that. And instead of selecting to Dubby, you select to Loop B internal. So here we'll select to Dubby 2 port 1. And in the MIDI clock in, we select Dubby 2 port 1. Now I'll turn the volume down on this because it's copyrighted material. But you'll see now when we press play, you also need to make sure that is set to sync, that is set to play. And then if we change the tempo, you'll notice that the BPM changes on Dubby to match. So this will mean that whenever you have a timed delay, it will always be in time with your MIDI clock. So we've also got a reverb dial. The only other difference there is the VU meter, which you don't get in the MaxForLive version. Okay, so that's Dubby 2. It's available at Gumroad. There's a link in the description. It's £1 for the standalone version and £1 for the MaxForLive version. Okay, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.